Retirement planning in the Isle of Man and navigating personal pension planning in the Isle of Man. This morning, I'm joined by my colleague and financial advisor, Andire. Good morning, Andire. How are you?
Good morning. Very good.
So the reason we're having this one today, which is a bit of an off-the-cuff video, is the fact that Andiri's had a couple of very interesting cases she's been working on recently with the Isle of Man. So without further ado, Andire, I'm going to pass over to you. If you sort of tell us in your own words what you found out about when you've been working with clients of pensions in the Isle of Man, and then we'll kind of freestyle some questions from there.
Just as a background information, these are clients that have contacted us because they had a UK pension. They're British citizens. They were living in the UK, working in the UK, and they were contributing, and the employer was contributing to a UK pension. Then they moved overseas, and in this case, my client moved to Europe, right? To France. To give a bit more details, and France, it's important that we know that piece of information. And then he was approached by an advisor that recommended a transfer of the pension pot to a QROPS in Isle of Man, while he was living in France. And this is possible. This happened. The transfer happened. It was all okay, all good. Then for some reason, the client was not happy with the performance of the portfolio and then contacted Cameron James. So, as you know, our services, the key element that we do in the beginning is a client profile and then a suitability report, right? So we investigate what's the current situation, and then we analyze the current portfolio. We do performance attribution and why the portfolio is underperforming, the costs, and all that. And then we contact also the current setup, the current scheme, the current QROPS administrator, to understand their situation. And funny enough, then is when we find out that now in Isle of Man, there's been guidance published in June 2024, so like 2 months ago. And when the clients, and this is a couple of cases, well, I don't know, couples, maybe there are more. Obviously my client is one, but there are more people, in this situation. If they try to transfer the pension pot out of Isle of Man jurisdiction into another jurisdiction that is not the one where they are living, then the regulator in Isle of Man is rejecting the transfer. Just to give you a bit of more color, in this case, so the current pension is in the Isle of Man. My client resides in France, and we are, recommending a potential transfer to Malta Praxis, just to bring the pension back to European jurisdiction, that this is where the client lives, right? So in this case, unless there is a good reason, and this is written in the guidance manual by the regulator in Isle of Man, unless there is a good reason, they will probably reject the transfer, meaning that the pension pot is stuck in the Isle of Man, because we are recommending a transfer into a country, Malta, that is not the same where the client resides, France. And this is like shocking. And then when it was so funny, because then I was telling, but why didn't you tell this to us before? We've been talking to you already for 3 months. And then they said, well, you should be knowing all this. Yeah, really, so as financial advisors, we need to know all the changes, all the guidance in all the jurisdictions. But yeah, this is where we're up to. This is what is expected from us, right? So that's another reason why you need to have a financial advisor. But yeah, so this is something that we will, I know there are not so many clients maybe with pension pots in Isle of Man, but this is what's going on these days. And this is guidance. This is regulation, So yeah. So that is the case that I think.
And did they give any reason or explanation as to why they've introduced this this guidance or regulation in June 2024?
I talked to, when I was doing obviously all the analysis, right? So first I talked to the administrators of the QROPS, They didn't give any reasons, right? So this is just what they're saying that is happening. And again, because it's so new, so they have cases are piling up now. So then I talked to the to the regulator, and actually to the tax office in Isle of Man. They said that they didn't give any explanations. They just they want to prevent people to transfer out of the Isle of Man to a jurisdiction they are not living in. Why they're doing this? Wow, I mean, it's shocking because I mean literally they're reducing, or they're preventing people exercise a right, that they have on their pension, that is to transfer wherever they want. And this is like something that they just take this on themselves. They decided this. What they're trying to prevent with this, I'm not sure. I mean, I think it's highly maybe political, or maybe they're trying to prevent any risk. But if you think about it, I mean, they are recommending clients to have their pension pot in the jurisdiction where they live. But in case of my client, he's in France. So actually now, I mean, he has the pension pot in the jurisdiction completely different to where he lives, which is France and then European Union, right? So why are they doing this? Not sure, but obviously, I mean, they explained. I mean, also I need to tell you, they are very, very nice. When I talk to the tax office there in Isle of Man, they explain the process, what I need to do to try to find, a good reason, and obviously they will review this good reason, before, you know, just ignoring the request. So I'm sure there's going to be a way out, right? But yeah, I mean, this is as well why sometimes bringing pension pots to jurisdictions that are a bit like Isle of Man or Gibraltar or Guernsey. I mean, it's not that they're not good or bad, but you need to know first. That there is a regulator that is different to the UK, and they have their own rules. And second is that rules change. It's you can do a transfer in moment of time zero, but then after 10 years, the regulator has changed their views on things, right? And then you have another issue. So yeah, so it's quite, yeah, it's an interesting job.
And just on this one, I'm just backtracking live in my head now. What's the rough value, or do you know what the rough value of the pension pot was at the time that it was transferred to the QROPS in the Isle of Man?
Yeah, that I don't have the data as of yet.
I mean, roughly, was it like 500,000 or 1 million or a couple of 100,000?
So now it's 500,000, but it may be 400,000. It hasn't grown so much. So that's why the client wants to get.
Oh yeah, he said that. Yeah. Okay. So if we go backwards from that as well, let's assume a zero-sum game. The pension pot went in at 500,000 or 400,000, whatever it was. Even if we go back in time and we look at the lifetime allowance that was available in the UK, obviously the standard lifetime allowance now, or former lifetime allowance, whatever you want to call it, is 1.073 million. But before that, I mean, over the years, lifetime allowance was up to 1.8 million at times. So again, for me, this goes back to day one. Like day one, when this client met a financial advisor in France, and the financial advisor in France, of course, we're never going to mention any financial advisor names, when that financial advisor in France recommended that QROPS in the Isle of Man, what was the rationale for recommending that QROPS? Because the client could have just maintained in a UK pension structure such as a SIP, which is a fraction of the cost of a QROPS and remains FCA regulated, which in my opinion, FCA regulated platform, FCA regulated provider is potentially more suitable for what was originally an FCA regulated pension pot in the first place. Why move it from that regulation to a third jurisdiction and regulation that the client probably has no understanding of, and the financial advisor as well? So for me, when I look at these client cases, I always go backwards and say, why was that advice provided? So in your experience, Andrea, I'm a bit of a loaded question, but in your experience, why are lots of clients recommended to utilize products like QROPS in sort of destinations such as the Isle of Man compared to something more simple, such as a UK regulated SIP?
Exactly. I don't know. I think they lack independence. When we do, and you know them obviously, But going back to the suitability report, we just don't do, I recommend you A, full stop. We do a thorough analysis of all the options available and what we discharge. And look, I mean, it is even more important what we discharge than what we recommend. If this comes to me, like when this client did the transfer 10 years ago, I would have done, okay, SIP transfer, you're going to France. And this is something as well that people don't understand. France is European legislation. I mean, I'm Spanish, right? So I know the EU legislation very well. We don't deal with trust very well. We don't legislate. In Europe, trust legislation is not existent. I mean, I've done 5 years university with law courses, 5 years, all the law that there is available in our jurisdictions. We don't regulate trusts. So being in a trust QROPS in France, wow, the French they're gonna be very interested in this setup. So obviously, when just taking into consideration all the characteristics of this client, we do this suitability report, and then we do this recommendation, and then we discharge things. So this, to me, I mean, is definitely not in like non a QROPS transfer. It doesn't make sense. I mean, only could be interesting if the client would like to do later, in France, but this is French tax. If they want to apply to opt for a preferential tax rate in France, something very, very specific. This is the only time that I would recommend a QROPS transfer if the client is living in France. If the client is living in Spain, boom, no, it's irrelevant. So it's better to stay in a SAPE for this type of pension pot, right? But that's why the suitability report is critical, not only what you recommend, but what you're discharging and why you do that, right? And in this case, I mean, look, we are FCA regulated, right? So we need to abide to consumer duty. This is what consumer duty is. This is the pure essence of consumer duty. So you want good outcomes for clients, but you want to prevent foreseeable damage. And this that you can foresee. If you're a financial advisor, you know that there is no trust legislation in France. You know the cost of a currency in France or in Isle of Man, it's very, very expensive, right? I mean, what about the legislation? All these things, right? So having, and this is the great things of working at, Cameron James, is like we have these different hats. I know the UK legislation because I'm regulated by the FCA, but also because I'm having clients in France, I know all the French legislation, right? So I can just put all these hats, or one leg in the UK, one leg in France, and then I can give like a very thorough advice. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's very helpful. And like, in my opinion, obviously all our advisors here at Cameron James are FCA regulated Andiri. For me, it's very important that all of our advisors, including myself, I'm still technically an advisor, we understand consumer duty extremely well in the United Kingdom. Now, outside of the UK, consumer duty doesn't technically legally apply to these people because they're not UK residents. But for us, it just becomes best practice. Like, it's the way you're educated, and everything we read from an FCA standpoint of consumer duty. For us, it almost like doesn't matter where the client is. Like, we're still going to do what's right by the client. Obviously, that's much deeper, and it comes down to our whole philosophy here at Cameron James. That my philosophy anyway is that there's no need to ever rip a client off ever. It's completely bad business. It's completely dumb. It's immoral, but it's also bad business. If you actually give clients really good financial planning advice, get the portfolio to grow, A, the assets under management of your firm are going to grow, so you'll make more money over the long term. B, you have happier clients, which is just nice to actually live and exist with people who are happy with your work. But C, you get far more referrals and introductions from happy clients as well. And I guess D as well, you probably end up with far less complaints. I think in answer to that question, Andiri was probably quite polite with it. But yeah, I think when we go back and we look at, circa 5-10 years ago, the amount of QROPS transfers that are happening, in my personal opinion and 14 years experience in the industry, I think the majority of QROPS transfers happening back in the day were purely for the benefit of the financial advisors, because even 10 years ago in the United Kingdom, if you transferred into a SIP, you couldn't go and whack a load of expensive commission bonds inside that SIP. You couldn't go and put esoteric investment funds that pay 4, 5, 6, 7% commission with Mauritius, whatever property development funds, that people bombard you all the time on LinkedIn trying to get you to sell some of their rubbish. But in the Isle of Man and other jurisdictions where there's a greater flexibility in terms of the investments you can have, that's not always a benefit. When you're in something like such as an offshore bond, which is an open architecture investment solution, you can invest in pretty much anything, whilst in an FCA regulated SIP, even if you were a bad financial advisor, if you tried to chuck something rubbish in there, it would just get spat back at you. Like people at AJ Bell, Fidelity, all the big boys in the UK would just laugh at you. They would say, what is this fund? It pays some type of commission. Absolutely not. We're not interested in that, Mr. Advisor. Put your client, please, in a plain vanilla iShares, BlackRock, anything we've heard of before is okay, but not this small little fund that's paying a large commission. Sorry, bit of a tangent there. So that brings me on to another question, Andiri. So obviously the Isle of Man has a very big reputation for offshore bonds, and I must admit as well, the Isle of Man has a very, in terms of its framework, stability, its independence, how long it's been there, etc. It has a lot of good stuff going on in the Isle of Man. But why does the Isle of Man in many times have such a bad reputation for offshore bonds in your experience, Andiri?
Yeah, and this is the advisor. I don't think it's the regulator. Regulators, they are there just to, protect people, right? Sometimes the problem is that trying to protect the majority means that the minority is not getting the best, the most efficient outcome. Offshore bonds are great. The problem is the use of those. You think about it, this is finance. They are investment vehicles. Their nature is not bad by any means, because they're just that. They are structures, right? How we use them is the problem. And this is the advisor. When it's so funny, because the first time that I came across an offshore bond, I was trying to help a client that was already in an offshore bond. And there was some top up to do this and the other. So I called the provider, and they said, okay, well, tell me the commission you want over the phone, But what are you telling me? How am I going to tell you what commission? We don't charge clients like that, We have our transparent fee structure. There is an advisor commission, right? But we don't require like an exit penalty or a surrender penalty or deferred commissions. We just don't do that. This is what it's called a clean bond, when it doesn't have like a surrender penalty or a deferred commission attached to it. But even the providers ask this to the advisors. So you see how. And then obviously everything is written. Clients don't understand very well what they're signing up to. And then 5 years down the line, when they want to get out of the bond, they said, well, yeah, but there is if you get out, there is a surrender penalty. And then it's, wow, I didn't know this. And it's shocking. They just don't know. And this is something, because the offshore bond is not regulated by the FCA, by UK jurisdiction regulatory bodies, then they can do these things. And then the next one is like, oh, okay, so maybe this is why all these advisors were suggesting transfer to an offshore jurisdiction, to a QROPS. It's not because the QROPS is the best for them. I'm sure that they didn't even do an suitability report, to be honest. It's just because they are getting the client out of UK jurisdiction, that's when you don't have the same level of regulatory scrutiny, and they can do all these bonds that they are not clean bonds, that they have all these exit penalties. This is one of the explanations that you can have, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we see it time and time again. And actually, interestingly, Andiri is actually working with a client at the moment where an offshore bond, we actually do believe, would be the best form of advice to his client. And I was saying to Andiri just yesterday, actually, I was saying the only thing you need to be careful with this client is, here at Cameron James, I say 99.9% of what we recommend now is FCA regulated platforms and products. Now, there's a 0.1% time that an offshore bond might be suitable. I was saying to Andiri, but you need to get this person to understand. If he goes and Googles the name, I'm not going to say the name of the provider, if he goes and Googles the name of that specific provider and they go online, they're going to see a horror stories of all these different people saying, oh, IFA ripped me off, IFA scammed me, commission, I've never heard from them, my IFA left me, blah, blah. Some IFAs don't even invest the money after putting the money into the bond. They get their 6, 7, 8% commission and leave the money in cash. We've seen that happen numerous times. So as explained to Andrea, you need to get the client to understand if you were going to be recommending this offshore bond, it would be on a 0 commission basis. And for anybody watching this, the very simplest way to understand if you're paying a commission is there an exit penalty? And I don't mean an exit penalty of like £200 or £500 or an admin fee for leaving a trustee. That's normal. Even QROPS might have an admin fee of £1,000 for leaving the scheme. I'm talking about tens of thousands of pounds sometimes as an exit penalty. Say, for example, a £500,000 pension pot, if it's transferred into a commission bond, can pay a 7% commission. 7% commission on that is obviously absolutely huge. You're talking about £35,000 in terms of that commission that can be paid out to that financial advisor. The offshore bond then has to recuperate that over a course of an 8 or a 10-year period, which is why the client is locked in. So yeah, you're completely correct, Andrew, in the fact that offshore bonds in themselves are simply an instrument. It is how they are implemented. And I do remember a time, again, I won't mention the name of another offshore bond provider, I remember looking at their charging schedule and there was 67 different ways to charge a client with the same product. It's not like, this day and age, if you go and look at an AJ Bell SIP in the UK, it's the same price for everyone. Everyone gets the same. It's written online. Everyone's created equal. Everyone gets the same bite of the cherry. But with the offshore bonds, it's down to the financial advisor to either increase or decrease their commissions, in my opinion, to see what charges they think they can get away with the client. So yeah, it's a very, very interesting area of the market. So Andrew, what's your current status with this client in the Isle of Man then? What's the next step with them? And have you explained all of this to the client as well? What did they think?
Yeah, well, so I tried to explain obviously and look, the regulator, they're all very nice in Isle of Man. I mean, they're trying to, I don't know, why are the reasons they're doing this? I don't know, but I'm sure there is something, something good, about it, because this is what I've seen from regulators, right, all over the world, and they're very nice. When you call them, they were giving me a lot of information, and they were very, very transparent. And I said, okay, look, in your guidance, you said that unless there is a good reason, right? So then they said, yes, if you have a good reason, then what you need to do when you do the transfer out forms, right, to get the pension out of Isle of Man, explain your good reason there, and we will look at it. We are not going to park your request with the other pile that is under review, because right now there is a pile, a lot of clients, we don't know how many, right? But there are more clients that the regulator is reviewing the transfer out requests. And they're still there, the regulator is reviewing everything like in a combo like a way. So for me, they say, we will look at your transfer out forms just for you individually. We are not going to park them with the rest if you have a good reason. And look, a good reason is like, yeah, this client lives in France. He's now in a QROPS. And you know what? There are not QROPS in France. So if we want the client to have the pension pot in the same jurisdiction where he lives, right now it's impossible for this client because there are no QROPS in France. So if you think about the next level, one level up in jurisdiction, if we cannot have him in French jurisdiction, then the next level up in Europe is the EU jurisdiction, right? So this is what I'm going to try to explain. And also the fact that right now his QROPS setup is a trust. And my recommendation is a QROPS setup, as a contract, because in France, as in the rest of the EU, we don't have trust legislation. So this will lower down a lot of the risk of this structure for the client. So, they were very, very nice. They were super helpful. And yeah, so this is the way forward with this case. Yeah. So it will be nice to see what happens with it.
All right. Well, yeah, I look forward to hearing more. If any of you have experience with the Isle of Man, bonds, QROPS, anything you want to add, let us know in the comment section below. If there's any specific videos you'd like me and Andiri to do, let us know. And as always, If you have any concerns about your offshore bonds or QROPS, you feel like it's not performing, let us know. You can book an appointment via the description section via the calendar link to find a day and a time, send over your paperwork in advance. We'll sit down, chew the fat with you and try to understand what options might be more beneficial for you. Andiri, thank you very much for joining this morning. Take care, and viewers, look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you, Dan. Have a good day.
Thanks. Bye-bye.